In this video, I'll show you my favorite methods for creating grays and blacks and browns in watercolor. And we'll keep it simple. Only two colors are needed. I like to mix grays and blacks using French ultramarine blue and burnt sienna or burnt umber. You get similar results with both. Now, why do I use these colors? If you take a look at photos of animals, you'll see that there are different kinds of blacks. Some are grayish, some bluish, brownish. It often depends on what's surrounding the subject. For example, if a dog is sitting outside on a sunny day, there might be a bluish reflection from the blue sky. This mix allows us to create many kinds of gray and black and even browns. So let's take a look at how to do that. Dip the brush in water to make sure it's clean, and wipe it on the paper towel to release some of that water. So the brush is just damp. I'll pick up some ultramarine blue from the palette. Presently, this is pretty thick, and I'm dipping the tip of the brush in water, bringing some water into the blue to thin it out just a little bit. So the color's looking like thin cream. And I'll bring a little bit more to the palette just so I have enough. Dip the tip of the brush in water, bring a little more water into the blue as needed. And now we need to clean that brush. So rinse it in water, make sure all that blue is out of the brush. Wipe it on the towel, make sure there's no blue coming off the brush. And let's pick up some burnt sienna. Bring it to the palette, and you see it's really thick. So I'm bringing a little bit of water into the puddle, bring in a little more burnt sienna, make sure we have enough to work with. Then rinse that brush, make sure all the brown is out of the brush, wipe it on the towel. And we're ready to combine the blue and brown to create gray. Dip the brush in water and bring plain water to the palette. Pull a little bit of that blue into the water. This is going to thin out the consistency. It's going to look more like blue tea. Pull a little bit of the brown into the blue and begin to mix until you start to see a gray. I'll continue to pull in just a little bit of brown at a time. Now this is starting to look a little too brownish, so you can pull a little blue in. And what we're looking for is something that looks gray on the palette. And the thickness or the consistency is that of milk. I'm using a paper towel to remove some brown so it won't spread into this mix. And I think I need a little more gray. Let's just make sure we have enough. So I'll do a little more mixing. This is looking like tea to milk. And here's how it looks on the paper. This is like a neutral gray. It's not too bluish or too brownish. Now, if you'd like to see a gray that's more brownish, pull in a little more burnt sienna. You want to keep it the thickness or the consistency of milk. Do you see the difference it makes when you add just a little more brown? What would happen if we would add some blue to the mix? Let's pull a little bit of blue in. So this is like a bluish gray. It's leaning a little more towards blue. So we've got a neutral gray, a brownish gray, and a bluish gray. And you can do even more. If you would pull some of that gray into the brown, do you see how the more gray you add, the darker the brown becomes? And we've got a dark brown. I just rinsed the brush and wiped it on the towel. Let's see what straight burnt sienna looks like. So do you see how you can create different kinds of browns by adding more, really you're adding more ultramarine blue to the burnt sienna. And when you add more blue to the mix, it becomes a darker brown and eventually a gray. Here I'm adding a lot more blue to the mix, and that's what we're getting, something that appears black. And by combining different amounts of blue and brown, you can create all kinds of grays and browns and blacks. And that gives you a lot of freedom in your painting. Here's a challenge for you. How many different kinds of grays and browns can you create using just mixes of these two colors? I'd love to see what you create and have fun experimenting.